Welcome, everybody.
Hey, hey.
Work smarter where you want.
This is learning at its most fun.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for yet another edition of our new partner spotlights. If you've been following us in the press or subscribed to our newsletter, you know that we have a new integration with fpPathfinder. So today I've invited Mike from fpPathfinder to talk about the new integration and to tell us what fpPathfinder is all about. Go ahead and take it away, Mike.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you see my screen there?
Yep, we're looking good, Mike.
All right, nice. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on over here. And I'm here to talk to everybody today about how you can become a more diligent advisor with checklists and flowcharts. But first, I want to start with a story, and it actually has nothing to do with finance. It has to do with medicine. About 15 years ago, the World Health Organization saw a really big problem. It's killing about 7 million people every year and killing another million people. That's on par with malaria and tuberculosis. What was scary, though, was that it was expected to increase significantly over the coming years. It wasn't a disease. It was actually the complication rate from surgeries. What they realized was that depending on the hospital, the type of surgery, and the part of the world, you could see a complication rate of anywhere from 3 to 17%. And with the number of surgeries increasing over the next decade or two, the number of complications were going to increase a lot as well. So the World Health Organization stepped in to study the problem, and they came up with a solution, a checklist. This very checklist. It's broken down to 3 parts. It's like the 7 things you need to do before anesthesia is turned on, 7 things to do before the first incision is made, and 5 things to do before the patient leaves the operating room. It turns out that doctors and nurses make mistakes only 1 to 2% of the time, which is kind of small when you think about it. But the fact that they do so much all day long, that those little mistakes add up to big problems. So to solve the problems, it's not about doing one thing differently. It's actually about doing 17 things differently. When they roll this checklist out in various hospitals around the world, they're able to see the complication rate from death be cut by almost half, and all other complication rates drop by about 1/3. This whole story is summarized in the book Checklist Manifesto, written by Atul Gawande. He was the lead researcher on this project. And it was this book that inspired me and Michael Kitces to start fpPathfinder. And what we do is we make simple tools to help advisors be more diligent. We have checklists that help advisors identify planning issues. It could be, some are life event driven. Others are checklists that you could use with your client every single year, like what issues should I look at the end of the year, or analyzing a tax return. Flowcharts tend to focus in on the decision points that clients have to consider, like what should I roll over my dormant 401k? There are a lot of decisions to be thinking through with that. And simple flowcharts can help frame the conversation that you have with your clients. Other flowcharts are rules-based. Can I make a contribution to my Roth IRA? There are actually just simple rules that you can follow to determine whether or not you can or can't. It's just a matter of trying to keep it all straight. You see, like nurses and doctors, we as advisors have a lot to keep track of. There's just so much going on. The rules are always changing. There's so many different strategies to keep in mind. And then just when you think you have it all figured out, the laws change. And now you have like all these new strategies to consider and to reevaluate. And so at the end of the day, simple resources like checklists and flowcharts can help you from forgetting something, or just minimizing some of the confusion that's already out there. And definitely it helps to save time, so you don't have to pour through tons of research every single time you've got another question that comes up. This is an example of a checklist. We have samples online on our website that you can go and see the full thing. Most of our checklists are about 2 pages long. They cover 20 to 30 planning issues for a given topic. They're not operations-based. These are for financial advisors to be using to identify planning issues. But they're written in such a way where it could be presented to the client or read to the client if the conversation's happening over the phone. This is an example of a flowchart. I put this one in here because this is one of the first flowcharts I ever created. I'm a financial advisor as well. And when I first got into this business, I was being asked, can I make a contribution to my IRA? It seemed like every day. And it seemed like so many times I was making little mistakes, just keeping track of the rules. It's like, oh yeah, you can do that. You can make a contribution. But no, you actually can't, because you don't have earned income. You have income, but it's not earned income. Or I call them back and say, oh, yes, even though you don't have earned income, your spouse does, so you do qualify. And it just drove me nuts, because I kept feeling like I was getting it wrong, and that was sending a bad message to my clients, or at least I thought so. So I put together just a simple flowchart like this. And one thing led to another, and over time it turned into this business here. So there's a lot of different ways that checklists and flowcharts can help you in your business. What you see here are, I don't know, maybe there's 10 or so items that we've seen in talking with other members about how these tools are helping them. There are 2 that I find particularly interesting. One is in the second column, it's the second bullet. It says, showing actual complexity of the decision and the potential issues to consider. We as advisors, we know that there is so much to keep in mind. But when we talk to clients, sometimes they're not aware of everything we need to know and everything we're considering before we make a recommendation. All they see is something very simple. This helps them to see just how involved our work is. So when we come to them with a recommendation, they know that we're evaluating a lot of different things. The other item is again, second column, last bullet point, multi-advisor quality control. If you work with a team of several different advisors, or maybe you've hired a junior advisor to help support you, implementing simple tools like these checklists and flowcharts can help provide some consistency in the advice that's being provided to your clients when you aren't there in the room. I could probably spend a whole segment just talking about this graphic here and what it means to me. But I guess the summary bullet points on this are that we see a lot of processes being rolled out in the advisory businesses. There's a lot of talk about what's happening with the administrative side. Workflows are becoming really important. A lot of folks are starting to incorporate that into their business. And then there's even, it's going down the realm of automation, where now there's online account openings. And we're seeing those kinds of trends also in the investment management space. More and more advisors are using model portfolios, and some are outsourcing it altogether, or using TAMPs, and really coming up with something very interesting there. But then you look at the planning process, and there it's just a little bit different. We're seeing a couple of trends. First of all, what most advisors have been doing, they meet with their clients on a regular basis there. Maybe some have some kind of agenda that they roll through each time. So there's a consistency that happens when they meet with their clients. But what I find particularly interesting is the service calendars that are being developed by some advisory firms. So in this case, like during the first quarter, clients are talking, or advisors are talking to their clients about taxes. And then in the second quarter, advisors are talking about cash flow with their clients. And in the third quarter, maybe they're talking about insurance or estate planning issues. And then in the fourth quarter, they're starting to plan for end of year and what needs to happen for the first part of the following year. The checklists and flowcharts can help provide some of that structure so that advisors don't have to recreate the wheel or make sure that what they're providing is out of date. And the other item to touch upon is that a lot of that is proactive client outreach. In all those examples I just mentioned, it's the advisor initiating contact with the client. So how is that experience different from when the client calls up and says, hey, my spouse just passed away, what should I do? And I think that at least just highlights some of the points about building out that planning process and creating a system that's as slick and as interesting as what we're seeing with investment management and administrative processes. Because ultimately, it's leading to a better client experience. So just to put fpPathfinder in perspective with some of these benefits we've been talking about of using simple tools, we have about 35 decision-oriented flowcharts, 20 issue-based checklists. We roll out 1 to 2 new resources every month, but we keep all of our resources up to date. So when you go into the member section, you know that everything's been updated. And depending on your membership level, you can white label the resources and put your logo and your color palette on those resources. And I think the reason why a lot of folks are on this call right here is to learn about interactive checklists and how they integrate with Redtail. So to look at those 2 new features, it makes sense to start with a story. And in this case, it's with aviation. It's really interesting because pilots use checklists all the time. They use them for just about everything they need to do when they're flying an airplane. And they've been doing it this way for decades. But what makes this interesting is that years ago, their checklists were written down and kept in a binder. It's kind of like what we see in the image over here. The problem is that it takes the pilot time and effort to flip around and find the right checklist to use. And that can make things a little unsafe just because the pilot might try to solve the problem following the steps from their memory instead of going through the checklist and taking that extra couple of minutes to pull the checklist up that they need. So over the last few years, their checklists have evolved. Pilots don't carry binders around anymore. Instead, they have an app on their tablet, and all of those checklists are there. So when the pilot's trying to land their airplane and they get to the step that says deploy landing gear, but the landing gear doesn't go down, they tap emergency on their app and then select landing gear will not deploy checklist. And so in 2 taps, the pilot has the guidance they need to get the airplane on the ground safely. While on the surface, it's about making the experience faster or easier for the pilots, really, it's about making it safer for everybody, especially the passengers. So to translate that over to what does that mean for advisors, it's this experience comparison. Imagine what it's like when a client calls up saying, oh, my wife just passed away. What should I do next? You know what a lot of advisors do? They put their client on hold and then frantically search on Google. Maybe the information they find is outdated or maybe it's incomplete, or maybe it's just straight up wrong, but they don't know. And then if they're lucky, they type a note into their CRM to document the conversation. We want to change that. And what we propose is this. Instead, the advisor launches the checklist directly from the CRM within 2-3 taps or clicks. The advisor completes the checklist. They can go through the checklist, checking the boxes, yes or no. If they need to, they can add in specific notes for each of the questions that were asked. And when they're done, they can click one button and send that entire completed checklist note back to the CRM. So it can be documented and searched there. That's what we're trying to do. The next couple of slides are just going to do a walkthrough of how that actually looks. So here you are, you're in Redtail in the contact record page. And here we have Bob Shoehorn. So let's say he calls up with an issue. You hit the little integrations button there, and up comes fpPathfinder. When you select that, while you're still within Redtail, you're able to select the checklist that you want to use. You can see here that we have them broken out into basically 4 categories. Life events, these are things like client just bought a house. What kind of issues do we need to think about? Recurring issues, these are items that come up just about each year or could. So maybe reviewing insurance policies or an estate plan, end of year planning issues, things like that that you could go through with your client on a recurring basis. Then we have timely checklists. These are the ones that are particularly top of mind. And if you can read them right now, we have one on issues to consider during a market correction or recession, one on the coronavirus pandemic, and then we have 2 on analyzing a tax return, one for retirees and one for people that are still working. And the last section of checklists are urgent ones. These are the emergencies. Client calls up saying that their spouse passed away, or there's a terminal illness, or I lost a job. We keep those front and center, easy to pull up so that very quickly you can start providing guidance to your clients. Once you select one of the checklists, now it takes you over to fpPathfinder's site. It pulls in the contact record's name and the contact record's ID. So now you can go through to check the boxes, to identify whether there is or is not an issue. If you need more information to understand what's the intent behind the question, or just need a little bit of backup information, there's a little information icon right there. And you can see in the first question that it's expanded to provide a little bit more information. And if you go down to the third question, have you experienced a disruption in your employment? You can see that we went ahead and added a note. This is an abbreviated checklist here. The real versions, you could keep scrolling down to see all 20 or 30 questions. And so when you get to the bottom, you hit done, and then you're taken to a page, again, with an fpPathfinder, and you see these 2 boxes. The top one shows a summary note. It lists all of the questions that were previously asked, and then it puts in a summary. Was there an issue identified? Were there any notes that were included? And it does that in a very simple text format so that you can either print it out, you can copy it and email it to a client or put it somewhere else, or click send to Redtail. And if you send it to Redtail, it now is sent automatically over to the contact record into the notes section. So you can see it's the same copy as before. It's just it just resides within the notes section of Redtail itself. So that you can search for it, you can reference it, you can assign other tasks to it. And then just from a compliance standpoint, you have it there. So starting to wrap up, there are a couple of best practices here. We're seeing a lot of folks where they're picking 1 to 2 resources to incorporate into their business. They're starting small. They're not trying to take all like 50 or 60 of these resources and roll them out all at once. It helps to familiarize yourself with the checklists. You can just pick them up cold and go right through them with your clients. They're written in that kind of way. But if the conversations get a little bit nuanced, or you have to delve into a certain area, it's helpful to just be aware of the intention of the questions and understand where we're coming from. I referenced this before, but some advisors are baking these checklists into their service calendar. So instead of just writing an email to your client saying, hey, it's time for your annual client review, schedule a time and let's talk or meet, it's, hey, it's time for the review, and check out this checklist of like 20 or 30 items that we can go over. Now, maybe only a third of the items actually pertain to that client situation, but it sends a really powerful message to your client that you're being diligent and that you're thinking about a lot of different things for them. Then on the next two here, we've got some advisors where they're going as far as to incorporate these resources into their marketing. So maybe they're branding some of the checklists and flowcharts and they're putting them up on their blog, or they're using it as a lead magnet. So they're saying, hey, give me your email address and I'll email this checklist or a bunch of these checklists over to you. And now that we actually have a really good integration and interactive checklists, this is making it easier for a lot of our members to complete a checklist and then when they're done, it's easier to get this stuff documented. Previously, these were all just PDFs, and so the advisors would have to check the boxes and fill in notes in the margin and then scan the document and then upload it and then assign it to a contact record. So that's why we really rolled out these features here, was to address that issue there and make it easier for our members to use this and incorporate it into their system and then reference it down the road. So in conclusion, I end with this quote, which I find to be very interesting. The checklists have doubled my client meeting efficiency by adding structure and a detailed process to our meetings. That's what we're trying to do for our advisors. All right, thank you very much. If you have questions, I think we've got a little bit of time here for that. And if you want to go into any details, you can send me an email over here.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.